Climate alterations caused by the burning of fossil fuels will soon impact available water supplies, affecting agriculture, energy production, and cities. Various innovations have the potential to address these challenges, but they also harbor problems. Desalination can adversely affect marine life along coastal areas where seawater intakes are located and concentrated brines from the desalting process are discharged. Wastewater reuse poses human health concerns if improperly managed and generates concern when proposed as a means to convert sewage into drinking water. And decisions regarding where and how any innovation should be deployed, including rainwater harvesting, are often contentious, especially when land use, aesthetics, or recreational impacts are important policy issues. I contend that policymakers must acknowledge societal elements comprising water resilience. A water resilient polity rests on multiple strategies to satisfy the criteria of technical feasibility, economic advantage, minimal risk, and public acceptability. My book advances three claims. First, all polities are implicitly bound by a hydrosocial contract with their citizens. It's the state's responsibility to ensure water security through competent, trustworthy management resonant with the polity's values. Second, this contract varies across polities due to differences in political culture, public values, and attitudes toward governance. In short, water resilience is socially constructed. And third, the social construction of resilience also constrains how decision makers address water problems as well as the remedies they choose to pursue. Top-down, technocratic approaches to achieving water resilience have been the norm in places such as Singapore, Israel, South Africa, China, and much of the Middle East. Socially conditioned aspirations toward water security and economic modernization have driven choices regarding innovations. Health and environmental risks are rigorously protected, leading for the most part to wide-scale public acceptance of innovations. More adaptive, collaborative, and publicly engaged processes prevail at subnational levels in Australia, the US, and much of the European Union, where conflicts over water rights and responsibilities, including rights to participate in water allocation and innovation decision-making, have driven efforts at reform.
Hello, my name is Uta Win. I'm Associate Professor of Water Innovation Studies at IHE Delft in the Netherlands and Visiting Professor of Marine Science for Sustainable Development at the University of Gothenburg. It's my pleasure to share with you some ideas on public engagement and the role of the public in mitigating the devastating effects of climate change. So overall, yes, public engagement is key, and we have several ways at our fingertips these days to do this. On the one hand, we have human-centered approaches such as living labs that really help us to put open innovation into practice. We have citizen science involving members of the public in the production of scientific knowledge, so putting open science into practice, truly opening up the scientific process. And we also have community-driven initiatives, putting environmental stewardship into practice. Schemes such as community-based environmental monitoring involve communities not only in the production of scientific knowledge, but also help us to monitor the effects of policies and policy implementation, set research agendas, and really take local action. So there are many options, but it's really key to think about how we put public engagement into practice and how we work with these new and different constellations of stakeholders. And I would think that all too often it's assumed that that would be easy. For some people, this is just a tick in the box exercise, and others think a one-off consultation is sufficient. I would like to argue that it's really key to consider who we involve, when and how, because the devil really in public engagement is in the detail. And there are three important things I would like to stress: motivation, expectation, and methods. So motivation refers to the fact that just because we open the gates, we suddenly open up the innovation process, the scientific process, and aim for environmental stewardship, doesn't mean that the masses will join these efforts. So we need to really understand what drives different stakeholders and also what holds them back, what are bottlenecks, practical or otherwise. expectations. Involving the public really raises expectations that things will change, that things will be done differently, that their efforts will have impact and indeed help mitigate the effects of climate change. So we have to carefully think through of how we're going to not only raise expectations, but how the schemes and the ways in which we're going to be working together actually delivers on those expectations. For many communities, especially poorer communities, the opportunity cost of being involved in public engagement is huge. So we really should not disregard the delivery back on expectations. And finally, a few words on method. So how we do this, how we bring different stakeholders together really requires sound and validated and tested methods. Co-design methods have been produced and should be carefully considered in these new forms of stakeholder engagement. How can we strive for inclusive representation of relevant stakeholders, citizens and otherwise? How can we be transparent about the way and principles of working together, and how can we come to agreements on how decisions within these public engagement efforts will be taken? So these are important aspects I would like to discuss with you further, and I look forward to that discussion. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Minnie Jain. I'm a director with the Flow Partnership UK, which is an NGO that works globally with local communities to manage desertification and flooding. The issues we are discussing at the conference today are all to do with climate change, global warming, migration, and we feel with the work that we do in the Flow Partnership that all of this is a direct I would say almost a consequence of the lack of water or the lack of management of water in the landscape. So I'll quickly show you some pictures from a project that we did in India that highlights what can happen, highlights the issue and what can happen if we take care of these issues at a local level with local communities. So with more and more people becoming impoverished and landless, how do we go from this degeneration to regeneration? How do we stop migration and reverse migration, which is usually because of lack of water? If there's no water in the villages, there's no food. If there's no food, people will leave for a city to see if they can earn a living over there. These pictures are from COVID-19 when the first lockdown was announced, and the very people who left the villages went back and to the cities, went back from the cities to the villages, often walking thousands of miles because they'd rather die at home in a village than in a heartless city. But neither of those places was going to give them any food or any security. So is there another way? And we feel that empowering communities to take action for themselves is a much more long-lasting solution to alleviating water stress. And the way we've done it, we feel that it's like a free bank account. The free bank account is in the World Water Bank, and each country has its own national bank, and each national bank has its own local branches, and these local branches are built and maintained by local communities, which is their water wealth, this is the wealth that enables a sustainable and prosperous rural life in their lands. This is the project in Maharajpura, a very dry and arid part of Rajasthan, and these pictures span about 9 months. January 2019, you can see how dry the water course is completely. There's nothing over there. When the work was done and the embankment was built, which you can see on the right, by the communities, you can see the water was held and immediately the change that came about in the community over there. And you can see it becoming greener and greener. The water didn't go away. It becomes lush. The farmer has water. The animals have water. There's enough grain. And look at the amount of wheat that is grown. So straight away, all those issues that we're talking about are taken care of at that level. When there's water sufficiency and security, there's nutrition sufficiency and security, there's rural economic sufficiency and security, then why would people migrate? There is an ample food, water, a livelihood, and a means of having an economic existence in their village, then why would people migrate? Why would there be desertification? So we say help build bonds with your community individually to keep your water bank account healthy. There is no urban resilience without rural resilience. So we'll talk more about these issues on the panel, but this is a little bit in terms of what we can do individually and globally as a community to stop this, to do our part to stop migration and deal with the issues we are dealing with in the conference. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name's Kate Baker and I'm a Research Fellow at the Centre for Water Systems at the University of Exeter. And I'm Director of Agile Rabbit, a public engagement charity in the UK, and a core team member of the social engagement platform, the UN World Water Quality Alliance. So, Role of People, brilliant title. So why is it important? I'm going to give 3 reasons. So we are in a huge transition. The climate crisis is going to affect everybody, no matter where you live in the world. And reaching these climate goals will require people to do things differently. So therefore, it would be bizarre not to include people in the decision-making process. So energy, water and climate policy has tended to look through a kind of technical or economic lens, and this now really needs to change, and we need a stronger focus on people and communities. So secondly, by bringing the focus back onto people and communities, it will ensure that inequalities don't increase further as we go into the climate crisis, and that the changes we make will be sustainable. Thirdly, people have skills and knowledge that can strengthen policy design. Policies will be better, and therefore we'll be better placed to mitigate the devastating effects of climate change if people are involved. So now, with my limited time left, I'm going to quickly talk about 3 things that I've been thinking about recently in regards to community engagement. So firstly, the word co-creation. This word is used so much. I see it all the time. And sometimes I really wonder, is it really co-creation? Co-creation is tricky and it really takes time. I feel we need to be honest and transparent with each other about what is co-creation and what is more of a kind of a communication exercise. Secondly is the agenda. Who is outlining the problem or the solution? Is it the people, is it the community, or is it actually a group of academics who've come up with the idea and then sort of suggesting it to a community? And this leads on to my third thing, which is about power balance. So this includes money, time, needs. So I can talk from a university perspective. Lots of research projects now want to include communities, which is fantastic. But how can the work be truly co-created when the money is held by the university and often the proposal is already written, outlining the project before the communities are even involved? And even if the community are involved in the initial stages, then how can people's time, energy be compensated? So these are some of the things I've been thinking about recently, and I'm really looking forward to having this discussion. And many thanks to Richard and the Cassandra team who have made this event possible.
Hi, I'm Fleur Hassan Nahum. I'm one of the deputy mayors of the city of Jerusalem. And I'm also the co-founder of the Jerusalem Water Forum, which gathers all the communities in the city to find solutions for both the scarcity of water and also runoff water solutions. As climate change intensifies, what we found in our city and in many cities around this country is that runoff water has become a major problem, flooding, causing a lot of danger, and in many cases, even killing people here in the city and around the country. So even though I'm somebody in political office, we decided that we were going to harness the power of the people in order and use Jerusalem's topological advantage to create a solution that deals with runoff water. And in Israel and in Jerusalem in particular, civil society is a very, very strong part of how things get done and how decisions are made. And in Jerusalem, the environmental community, the water solutions community, regular residents, and the Israeli Nature Authority, Nature and Park Authority, created a runoff water solution in a park which is based in a valley. And what was done was the researchers were brought in to put together 4 different filters from in the hills of the valleys coming down to filter out all the different runoff water, that they wouldn't flood the city. All the different rivers in the city were pushed towards this particular hill going down to this valley. And the last layer of the pool of filtering becomes a natural biofilter, and the water is completely recycled. We went from a situation where every time there was strong rainfall, intensified rainfall for a couple of days, the city would stop functioning, to the point where now 60% of the runoff water of the city is being used, filtered, and recycled down a natural valley. Today, this center is being used to teach other cities around the world, cities mainly on hills, to use their natural topological and geographic advantage to be able to deal with the phenomenon of runoff water. But what's most exciting is that most innovation in our country comes from the bottom up and not the top down. And this is a solution that was developed by experts and by civil society and by the Parks Authority in our city. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to everyone. It was a very interesting video. So I would like to introduce myself first of all. My name is Leonardo Picciniti. I'm the managing director of Europe Business. It's a company based in the UK. But the most important aspect also I'm representing as a climate pact ambassador of the European Commission. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to introduce this panel. You see already an inspiring videos from the panelists. And I would like to give an opportunity to them to have a conversational aspect specifically on the topic that is being raised during the videos. But first of all, the panel line, the role of the people, we need to make a very important analysis of the whole sectors that is being involved in terms of co-creation, implementation of policy aim at mitigating the effect of the climate change aspect. That will be more specifically effective the supranational strategy, the implementation at local level, especially at municipal level, with the role of the ordinary citizen as a main priority. It's a pleasure, of course, to introduce again the session of the Professor David Feldman from the School of Ecology from Universities of California, Irvine, Uta Wynn from Associate Professor from the Water Innovation Study, DEFT, and Assistant Professor, and Albert, Visiting Professor from Marine Citizen of the University of Gothenburg, Milin Jain, Director from the Flow Partnership, Fleur Hassan, the co-founder of the Israeli Women Foundation, and Dr. Kate Baker of the Social Engagement Platform, United Nations, and the University of Exeter. So welcome to all. We would like to break in the point, a very simple question to the citizen. I think what is being raised during your video will be interesting to see specifically how you can define citizen engagement. I would like to start with David first. Also, he's producing interesting books regarding they will be published in 2022. So I leave you the floor to David, but anyone that can be also intervening in this conversation. So definition of citizen engagement, David.
So yeah, thank you very much. I would start by saying that it has to be, and we've heard this from a couple of other panelists today as well, it has to be a form of two-way communication in which not only decision makers engage and talk to the public and solicit their opinions, but the public is actually empowered to set the agenda, to not just to come to a decision-making forum on water and climate-related issues and opine on issues, but can actually set the agenda and frame the major issues that will be discussed. I think a second quality is there has to be an expectation of accountability, that when citizens engage, there will be outcomes that will be shaped and formed by their input, and that decision makers have to understand that they will be held responsible for the performance of certain objectives. I think too many times, as a number of the other panelists have mentioned today, citizen engagement is also often framed as we as experts say, well, we'd like your input into something that we think is a concern, or we'd like to take your concerns under advisement, but with no specific commitment to an outcome or an actual policy change. So that's where I would start, two-way and accountability.
Thank you very much, David. That would be interesting. Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I totally agree there with David's sort of definition. I just wanted to just jump on the word empowerment. I think, so I'm talking mainly from a university perspective. I often hear how we need to empower communities, we need to empower people. But in fact, on the ground, people have enthusiasm. There's so many fantastic projects that are going on. And I feel actually academics need to be sort of empowered or sort of pushed to make sure that this is a two-way form of engagement. I think, as I sort of mentioned in the video at the beginning, this word of, citizen engagement is often actually just a talk or a panel discussion and then feedback in that way. But it has to really be kind of community led.
Yeah. Can I second that?
And I give you 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much. I'd like to follow on smoothly from what David and Kate have said to say, indeed, it's the way in which we engage citizens that's really crucial. And there are many shades of grey, and not all of them are wonderful indeed for the community. So we really need to pay attention of how we do this. And, that's a huge educational effort of many of the stakeholders who these days practice citizen engagement. And in terms of defining citizen engagement, I think we could also have a discussion about citizen engagement and what. I mean, we organize society in terms of producing scientific knowledge, and so there we would talk about citizen science. We organize society by practicing water management. We have elected officials, we have civil servants, and we can engage citizens in the actual practice of water management through community actions in various ways, agenda setting. We can also involve citizens in the innovation process. So that's increasingly opening up. So I think that's also something we should bear in mind when we talk about citizen engagement. Well, which part of society are we engaging them in?
Yeah, Minnie?
Yeah, thank you, Leonardo. I completely second what all our panelists are saying, and Kate, especially when you say, that academics need to be empowered as well. So the work we do with the Flow Partnership is directly on the ground with communities. And I go even further than saying community engagement, because engagement seems to feel that we are engaging them. Instead, if the project or the issue is community-led, it's community-driven decentralized water management, then they are engaging us in resolving their problem, not the other way around. And when you engage and with people with what they know to be successful with their traditional wisdom, that kind of work is much more long lasting. And we who have studied these issues through books and through the written word, get an experience of what actually works on the ground. So that engagement and empowerment of both sides occurs when the community leads with what they know. So then it's a real engagement. Then there is a real solution to the problems that we are all facing, and then you can see that on the ground. You can actually see the results and impacts of that on the ground.
Thank you very much, Minnie. So, any thoughts from that?
Yes, I want to say that I started off my career as an activist. So I have a perspective on both sides of the coin. And here in Jerusalem, what happens is that every governmental department, local or otherwise, has a public participation department. The problem is that the public participation people didn't get the memo of what public participation actually means. And what they think it means is, I'm going to tell the public what we're going to be doing, rather than I'm going to engage the public, listen to the public, and try and come up with solutions together. And I'm not a very popular politician with these departments, when I come and say to them, this is not real public participation. And so when I was running for office, you know, everybody does these speaking events, and I decided to do listening events. And I went around to every single neighborhood to understand what their problems were and what their solutions are. I truly believe that there's a lot of wisdom in the crowds. I believe that there's a lot of wisdom in people suffering from different issues going on in their neighborhoods. And this is the only way to really solve problems. And this is, for me, as a now local politician, an uphill struggle to get my colleagues to understand that this is the only way to move forward, and this is the only way to make real change. I'm not saying the government has to come in to it afterwards, but they have to start by listening. And so there's two things that we try and do. One is change the ways that the public participation departments in these different local government offices deal with public participation. And the second thing is, so that's kind of a change in mind shift, which is very, very, we see this very much in terms of transport solutions, and we push forward mass transport solutions with public participation, but really listening to people. And I think the second way to do it is to also understand that only by asking the questions and by listening to the real problems of real people and for politicians to basically really accept the fact that the solutions are there and the solutions are coming from the ground. And then finally, what I will say is that I tell the neighborhoods and I tell people and the activists, build it and they will come. When people actually build their own solutions, the government then comes on board when they see you've already done it. So that's, I guess, my insight on that.
Thank you very much, Kate. You want to add it?
I just wanted to ask you, Fleur, what do you think the barriers are for your colleagues? Why do you think they do get it, but they're concerned, they're kind of scared of the public? Or do you think they don't actually get the kind of concept of that like listening process?
I think it's a combination of everything you've said. I think they don't really get, they think they know best. And I'm talking about also, I'm talking mainly about professionals. So I'm talking about, let's say, transport experts. So listen, I've done a 7 years transport degree and postgrad. What's somebody in a neighborhood going to tell me about transport? Meanwhile, the guy in the neighborhood is waiting in his car for 45 minutes because somebody planned something the wrong way. And so this is constantly the battle. I think it's a combination of we know best. It's arrogance. It's maybe professional arrogance. Secondly, it's this kind of bureaucratic mindset that we're doing for the people. How can the people help themselves? There's that type of thing going on. So I think it's a combination of they don't get it and we know better.
Yeah. Minnie or David? Minnie?
Yes. Can I just add to that there is that arrogance that we know better, but actually it's the people on the ground who are dealing with the problem do know better. And then when we allow them to actually come up with the solutions, we found in our work that they own that solution, and it's a much more long-lasting solution. It's saving the government, the policymakers, everybody loads of time and money and actually resolving the solution. So it's a no-brainer that you work with the community, get them, listen to them, get them to come up with the solutions, and then see what happens. In the presentation that I'd done, the embankment, the bank that was built, and then the water came back, that was done by the community. That was traditional wisdom. We only helped facilitate it, but it was them. And then intergenerational, the solution is intergenerational. That community will never run out of water because they built it. It's ours. We built it. It belongs to us. And Fleur, you're totally right. That's when the government comes on board, when they realize that it's working. Thank you.
I just want a little anecdote. We've had stories where Jerusalem is made up of many sister companies that do things. So there's a development company and there's an entertainment company, and everybody has their own different mandate. I'm very involved with innovation in the city of Jerusalem. And there are many nonprofit organizations in Jerusalem that push forward the innovation ecosystem. Now, the Jerusalem Development Authority, where now I'm on the board, but it took them years to accept me there, they knew everything. And I said to them, why don't we co-opt one of these nonprofit organizations to actually lead this particular innovation solution? They didn't listen to me. They took their own company to do it. The company set it up. Meanwhile, I helped the nonprofit put together their solution, and they wasted all that money. And today they've adopted the solution of the nonprofit. So even when they don't do it, in the end, they understand that. And I keep telling them, you see civil society as a block. And I'm telling you, this is your strength. And this is really a change of mindset that has to happen.
Is a very good point when you mentioned, because I was just to go back what Uta say about the innovation process. And I think that will be also interesting to see future development, because now we talk about innovation ecosystem, this aspect. There is one important aspect that I would like to stress as a moderator of this conference, is also the inclusivity of the vulnerable groups. So we talk about specifically minorities, women, youth, migrant. They will be not excluding from the citizen engagement. This is a very important point that we would like to stress, because how we do ensure that these groups will be engaged, especially we talk about invisible. What happened now for the COVID pandemic is clear that there is an issue that is very important to engage also this part of it. Who want to react first?
I think a couple of things might be worth noting on this, and it's also a good segue from Fleur Hassan's comments. Too many times when we have public engagement, or what we call public engagement, it's orchestrated around deciding, already making a decision, announcing it, and then defending it. What this does is this absolutely alienates members of civil society and convinces them that government is not listening. It contributes, certainly we see this in the United States, to a tremendous citizen cynicism toward the role of the state in terms of answering problems. So I think there's a couple of things that have to be considered. One is logistics. Do we actually reach out to underrepresented populations and make sure that they can attend and participate in various forums that are designed to make decisions? This has to do around a lot of things: where events are held, what time of day. Do we consider that people have to work for a living? Do we actually structure the engagement process around their availability and their time and their economic and social concerns? And I think secondly is the environment that we create. Is it welcoming? Do we actually want people, particularly underrepresented minorities, to participate in a way that's going to make a meaningful difference in their life? Or is this, as a couple of panelists have already noted, really a kind of a performance art, where we're holding an event, we say that we want your opinion, we want your input, but in fact, we're not really welcoming of any input that is contrary to what we've already pre-decided. In the United States, again, we see this constantly, and I know in other societies as well, in terms of decisions over public works. Transport was alluded to. We've certainly seen it in terms of water infrastructure, and I think we see it in terms of urban development especially, and relationships between well-off communities and less well-off communities.
Yeah, Uta, and then Fleur.
Thank you very much. David, I'd like to pick up on one key term from what you've just said, which overall I agree with. It's the term process. When we're talking about citizen engagement, we're talking about a process. It's not the mere dismissal of what other people experience or know or may not know, and whether we think that's relevant. When we do open the door to citizen engagement, we're engaging in a process that may take shorter or longer timeframes. And that process comes with ethical responsibilities. It has either explicitly or implicitly values underlying how we take decisions, whose knowledge counts, and how we make sure indeed that minority disadvantaged groups actually have practically an opportunity to be part of that process. So I'd like to stress, that whole package comes with a huge responsibility. And at the same time, as a global community, we've advanced our ways of working in citizen engagement. So not each citizen engagement effort needs to start from scratch. There are already, sound ethical principles available on which we can work and which we can indeed then roll out to whoever may be in the lead as the project manager, which sometimes are the scientists, sometimes are local authorities, sometimes are the communities themselves. It almost doesn't matter as long as we agree what those basic principles are upon which we work together.
Yeah, Fleur, and I think Amini want to add something.
I want to say, as most of you know, Jerusalem is quite a complicated city made up of many minorities. We have in Jerusalem 25% of our population is ultra-Orthodox Jews. They've got their own characteristics and needs. We have 39% Arab Muslim population. And of course, the rest is the rest of us, which is a mixture of secular people and traditional people, new immigrants, etc. And so what most government departments and offices and local government departments do is they have a public participation person per population. So you've got a public participation, they hire somebody from the Arab community, they hire somebody from the ultra-Orthodox community, and they hire somebody from the regular community. And sometimes, and that's kind of how it works. You talk to the Arabs and I'll talk to the ultra-Orthodox Jews and I'll talk to the women, and and I find that also very kind of fake curation of talking to citizens. And again, this is where civil society has done better than the government. And we've got many different organizations, nonprofit organizations, that their whole essence is public participation. And one in particular is public participation for solutions and sustainabilities. And the best thing about this organization is that it's Jews and Arabs together. And of course, the ultra-Orthodox, whoever wants to join. And it's become a model of how, not just of how you do public participation or how you get to consensus decisions in a complicated city, but now, as we said earlier, build it and they will come. The government are now using this organization in order to create consensus for things they want to do, because they've really developed this very unique way of building the consensus amongst populations that often clash. In my work, I ensure that whatever organization I'm involved in or whatever process I'm involved in, everybody from the different minorities of Jerusalem are involved in every single process. And because Jerusalem is a city of different neighborhoods, and most of these minorities live in different neighborhoods, we have in a sense, Arabs live in their neighborhoods, ultra-Orthodox Jews live in their neighborhoods, secular people live in their neighborhoods. That's the way that it is in Jerusalem. What we do also have, which is very interesting, and it's the only model in the country, in America they've got it, it's called community boards. And this is something, a system that was adopted from America, where every neighborhood has its own kind of community, mini community council. And what we did, and this is something that the corona was good for us in Jerusalem, we created a forum of all community councils. So now that forum includes the Arab communities, the ultra-Orthodox communities, the secular communities, everybody now talking together about their common needs and challenges and potential solutions.
Thank you very much, Minnie.
Yeah, I want to pick up on the point Uta made about process. It is a process, and you know what, Fleur, you're saying about bringing every community on board and having their voice heard. That is part of the process, because without that, the process doesn't complete. And that's where civil society organizations play a huge role. Enlightened politicians are very few and far between, and not only, even if you don't have a judgment based on they are really, really busy. And that's where civil society comes in, the organization comes in. So even the project that I showed you, that's one of engaging the community and hearing every voice in the community, so that when the community finally has the solution, it is a consensus solution that has been designed by the community and enabled, is something that civil society organizations are really good at. So we start the process at least 4 to 5 months in advance. And that's where you help, that's where government, civil society, knowledge holders, traditional wisdom, they come together. That's the platform. And then it is successful. And that is true. That is a true successful process of community engagement for getting the impact that you want dealing with the issues that are at hand.
Kate and Uta.
Yeah, this is great discussion. Just going back to the question about, making sure that communities are not excluded. One thing that I've come across recently that's worked really well is there's an organisation in Exeter called Interwoven that I kind of volunteer with. And they have this wonderful thing called Period of Grace, which is when life gets hectic, things are too much, you just say, I need a period of grace, and that tags you out. I think with community projects, certain people in society or everybody, like life gets so busy and it's hard to keep your, keep things up. And that might be a barrier for certain people to get involved, especially if you've got caregiving responsibilities and various other things. So it's going back to this word process, I guess. It's getting these things in place that opens it up to more people.
Yeah, Uta?
And I just briefly wanted to point out that we're talking about two generically different settings. So Fleur, I think you're giving a fantastic example of almost institutionalized public participation and the way in which it's organized in Jerusalem. That's fantastic. Many of us work in research and innovation projects, and you almost have to reinvent and ensure ethical practices in citizen engagement, in your co-design practices, in whatever. And that's quite a different setting because you have a different constellation of stakeholders, different case studies, etc., around the table every time. So, they're two different games. Of course, overall, working under the same umbrella and with the same ambition, but in two different settings, and therefore, also different challenges.
I think it made a very interesting point about the engagement process, but also the civil society aspect from your side. Thanks for that. And I believe one of the key questions that we should answer in this panel is, are the people are always right? So is how they does ensure that the correct decision to the sustainability in the future, especially what happened now with the climate crisis. There will be the democracy will be beneficial of those issues. They should be left to the experts. So that is a very important. The discussion is being done about how the experts should be educated, but also how the civil society should be also educated experts, because this is also who's want to react about this aspect. We of course are covering some topics already, but I believe this is a key question about the people, if they are the right decision. Who's want to?
I don't think the people are always right, but I think there's something that everybody's saying here, especially Minnie, about basically making people stakeholders. And I think that's really what it's about. And even if at the end of a process which has been well managed and well done, the decision is not exactly what the people wanted, elements of what was said and elements of the concerns will always trickle into the final decision, even if it's not the final decision the people wanted. We have people in government and in research and, and people who are authorized to make the decisions for a reason. I don't not believe that, otherwise this would be chaos. But I think that if the process is done correctly, you have to involve elements of what the people have presented into the process, even if in the end, the decision is not exactly what they would have hoped for. And I think that's the difference. The difference is that a process should be about building some type of consensus. And of course, at the end of the day, a decision has to be made, but that process will itself make that decision better, even if it's not exactly what the people wanted.
Yeah, Kate?
I was just going to say, if we look at the state of the world, then the experts definitely aren't always right. And it's, incredibly important to make sure, it's not like the experts have got it right or the community have always got it right. This is a learning process. We've got some significant challenges that we've got to get through that are really complicated. And I think if we all work together, then we're more likely to have a better outcome. And these things take time, I think there needs to be, we've already heard about listening, Fleur's spoken about that, there has to be a lot of time for us to understand each other and to go through these processes in order for it to be a success.
Yeah, Uta, you want to react? Okay. Uta, you want to react, or is it something come from
Yeah, just a small point. Other people always write. Let's remember that decision makers are also people to begin with. But yeah, I think again it comes down to citizen engagement pans out differently in different settings, and it depends also what governance setting we're doing it in. So the room that local knowledge, indigenous knowledge is given is not the same in all citizen engagement settings. So it really comes down to the governance of whose knowledge counts in the process and how. But I would agree with the other panelists that indeed bringing as much knowledge and experience, practice-based experience to the table can only benefit the process. It doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it does make the result more sustainable typically.
Yeah. David, you want to say?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I want to amplify. I agree with everything that's been said. I wanted to pick up on something that Uta said earlier that I think ties into this, and that is we do have to remember that we're dealing, all of us represent open societies, democratic societies. And I think as a result, it is very important that we understand there is an ethical commitment, or should be an ethical commitment to a process. Experts and the lay public, or what we commonly call the lay public, may often disagree. And at times, fervent environmentalists have been accused of being somewhat elitist, relying on expertise and criticizing the public for not moving quickly enough, or not coming up, or not agreeing with the quote, scientifically right answer. I think what we have to remind ourselves is that we don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. We have to engage people in a way that makes them feel that they are invested in decisions. And if you actually have a two-way process of communication, lay audiences will eventually trust and believe in the science, and will take on certain behaviors that are appropriate to the setting. But there has to be a degree of patience and listening on the part of experts. Too often, I think, in decisions regarding sustainability, ironically, we can take a posture of arrogance. The public need to do certain things because they're right. And as a result, we ignore the process of learning and engagement and two-way discussion that's inherently important to the functioning of a democracy.
Thank you very much. Minnie, before, and Uta.
Yeah.
We still have 10 minutes, but we also have some interesting question by the public that I want to like to share with you. Yeah, Minnie?
I'll be very quick. The process of engagement between the experts, it's very different when it's a rural community, and it's very different when it's an urban community. So the rules of engagement are very different. We mustn't romanticize that the urban knowledge keepers, the experts, know the rules of engagement. And that's a point we really, every time we are dealing with a solution that is a global challenge, it is important to keep that in mind. And I really echo what David said, that in terms of open societies or dictatorships and various other, what are the rules of engagement? So those are points to really reflect on very deeply before we take further steps.
Sure. Uta, you want to? I see that your hands up.
Yeah, I wanted to just sketch that in the larger scheme of things, this week is a very important week, not only because the Cassandra Conference takes place, but because UNESCO has adopted the recommendation on open science. And that stipulates very clearly the role of societal stakeholders in the engagement in the scientific knowledge production process, the role of local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, different knowledges coming together as we do scientific research and innovation. So I think that sets the scene, because at a global level, as an international community, we've advanced our understanding of what does it really mean, to jointly produce knowledge and apply it.
Yeah, very interesting point about this an important decision by UNESCO. Let's recap, because we still have 9 minutes left. We have two burning questions that will be also interesting for the panelists. The first question is related to environmental policies. Of course, is an issue about the effectiveness of the required time and the environmental policies. The social consensus built on the citizen engagement, how much the particular political party interest disturb this process. So, in other words, there will be an important aspect that what we're discussing now about the climate crisis, how this engagement process, it was mentioned already from Uta about the process definition, how this implication of the consensus building of the city's engagement, the party political interest will be disturbed in this process. Who's want to react? Fleur?
Yeah, I think as the only politician on the panel, I don't think it's in the party political interest to do a lot of participation, public participation. That's part of the problem. The party only cares about its membership and its votership. And what they don't understand, and this is something that I can't stress to people enough, that when you're a politician and you listen, this is my experience. People come to me all the time from different nonprofit organizations and different movements, and I spent 45 minutes asking questions and listening, and I didn't say much. And they leave my room and they're like, wow, she's such a great politician. I didn't say anything, but I did something that they're not used to. And that is actually asking them questions and listening. But I don't think it's in the DNA of political parties to do that, except with their own membership, just so that they can win primaries or win their spot in their region or whatever it is. And I think that I just have to plug women here. I think this is where female leadership can have an advantage in this. I think in general, with no disrespect to the wonderful men on the panel, I think it's more in the modus operandi of a woman to listen more. And I think that when people talk about the leadership of the future and the characteristics of the leaders of the future, a lot of these characteristics are female characteristics, and listening is certainly at the forefront of all of that. And in my own way, I try and do what I can to push that agenda forward in my own political party and movements.
Thank you very much, Fleur. I think the leadership issues is extremely important to tackle those issues. We need to build a new generation of leaders in this case, and that is very important, especially for the climate and the immigration crisis agenda. There is another question from the audience. I'm just reading the question, which is say maybe not everyone is going to be happy, but you need to be explained why you took a decision and lots of time that will be not up. So who's want to react on this? This is very question that can be also a panel discussion for a long time. And I know that we have 6 minutes left. I want to wrap up with some issues. Minnie, you want to say something about this?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in the conversations and the engagement that we have with communities, especially in the rural communities, is the discussion is what needs to happen. And there'll be 10 people saying, no, do this and no, do that. Don't do this, don't do that. My grandfather did this, my grandmother did that. And there'll be enormous number of suggestions, but eventually the one decision has to be taken. And to pick up on that point of listening that Fleur was saying, and politicians, the issue is of governance. The person who is governing is taking the decision after listening to the people, and then does decide and tell everybody why that particular decision is taken. In general, people are then very happy. They've been listened to, they've said what needs to be said, all the issues have been considered, and then the decision that's been taken has been explained why and how it will work. And I think that's a model not just for rural, but also for urban. That is something which we today, in this very fast-paced life with Facebooks and decisions and experts and everything, we tend to forget. We tend to forget that if we just sit back, slow down, listen, and then make the right decision and communicate it, a lot will get taken care of.
Very interesting point. Uta, you want to react?
Yeah, just to build on what Fleur and Minnie have said. And yes, of course, we have inherent authority to take decisions, certainly from the institutionally driven public participation. Like we have elected officials, we've elected them to take those decisions. And it's great if, like Fleur, they actually listen to us, but then, take action based on what they've heard. the friction that still persists in that system is that the turnaround time of changes that politicians are looking for within the next re-election cycle is typically different than the kinds of changes we're facing in the water world and the massive wickedness of those changes. And that's where some of the friction is, and the delivery back on people's expectations can really come to a crunch. And secondly, again, pointing to the project-based citizen engagement, that's a different ballgame, because it's not necessarily elected officials who take the decisions. So I come back to the point, let's be clear of how we're governing the project. Who takes decisions? Is it totally consensual? What democratic elements does it have? Doesn't it have? Somebody has to write reports for the funders and report back on how resources have been used. So just to point out different dynamics here.
Yeah, very, very interesting. There is another question before I close and to wrap up. This is come from Leisham Whitman. Say that we seem to be forget sometimes the value of water. Do you agree on principle of this question? Is there anyone who want to or made any reaction finally before I hand over for the final conclusion?
I missed that. Could you please
repeat
the value of?
Yeah, is basically in the question say that we seem to me that forgetting the value of water, specifically on the 2021, is water has become
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
it's been said by many, water is underpriced, undervalued, and overused. And one of the things that has to change worldwide is we have to actually value water as we do some other resources, but we have to wait not until there's a dire necessity, but realizing that it has an intrinsic value. And we have to stop thinking of water as being in different silos. There is one water. We have to use, reuse, recycle every single drop, and we have to conserve it and save it for the next downstream user and future generations. That is an ethos that has not yet sunk in firmly to public policy regarding water.
Yeah, Minnie?
And to add to that, absolutely, water is not a commodity. It is life. It gives life. So there is no monetary value that can be attached to water. It is life. So we cannot commoditize it, and that's the thinking that needs to change in today's understanding of what water means to us. Water is life.
Just to be against everybody else here, I think I'm the only member from the Middle East. And we don't undervalue water. We really, really don't, because it's been scarce for a long time. And now, very happy that with the new era of peace with Gulf countries, we'll be able to come up with regional solutions also.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It was a very inspiring panel. I want to just wrap up with a few conclusions. I would say that as I'm listening, as an observer, has been working in water sectors for a long time. One of the issues is being raised, and what I found very inspiring is that when we talk about citizen engagement, we talk about citizens should be setting up an agenda. It was a very interesting point. It was mentioned. Also, it was mentioned several times the issues of the empowerment that is not come from the citizens, but also from the education and from the academic point of view. This is a very important. I like also the definition that, of course, there is a huge effort of education effort to promote regarding the citizen engagement, also the science in society, but also the correlation with the innovation process. This is an extremely relevant aspect because if we want to engage, we need to engage all the value chain, not only there. And where it's been said several times about solutions and governance, I'm not talking about government, but they will be interesting to see the future leadership. So how we want to tackle the new leaders that will be important to driving the society. This is a very important point that there is a very interesting point. I'm talking about from the climate pact text. Now there is a key word that has been discussing on the citizen is a pledging, using pledging. So using the implication of the commit and empower more through the civil society assembly. And I think this is an interesting point of motivation, expectation, and method was mentioned from Uta. and in particular the work of the vulnerable groups. So the vulnerable groups has become extremely important to engage an agenda. And also the question is being raised by the public, from my point of view, was quite innovative and very useful to feeding the conclusion of this panel. So first of all, let me thanks to the panelists to be with us for the Cassandra Conference, and there will be aspiring and to continue this process in the future. So I would like to close this session, and thanks to the organizing to inviting myself personally. But I would like to definitely thanks to the panelists for the big contribution to the Cassandra Conference. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.